Working as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the whole wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
That's Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Thursday, 10:30 Eastern time here, streaming to you live on rumble.com/amradpod. If you don't mind, folks, do what my mom said in the chat and smash the thumbs up. Give us a follow as well if you want to subscribe. Always appreciate it. Definitely subscribe to the audio format on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, all of those streaming platforms. That's where there's a very, very large audience who are trying to radicalize here on the American Radicals Podcast. It's Thursday. We're going to be talking about, is this a joke? Because I think one of the advantages that we have, and the only bringing the show to you 3 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, is that we get a little bit of longer runway to absorb the news cycle and not necessarily react right away to everything that happens. So everybody yesterday was talking about the president's speech. It was kind of the State of the Union, but kind of not, because he's a brand new president again. And we wanted to focus on the news that actually happened. And a lot happened, and a lot of it has us scratching our heads, like a college student who can't read, who's now filing a lawsuit. The government funded a gender-neutral cartoon for an alien, for reasons. Food stamps now going to be eligible to be used in restaurants in some select states across the country. And now we have the globalists buying the Panama Canal. All of that, a whole bunch more to get to. I've got a smorgasbord, sort of like a grab bag, but you're just going to be scratching your head at most of it. So we went with the "is this a joke" motif for the day. But before we do that, I want to give an update, guys, and actually give a shout out to the OG sponsor of the American Radicals Podcast. That's the True Earth Pharmacy. So you guys, I'm going to encourage you all to go to trueearth.co, trueearth.co. They updated the website. They updated the promo code. Finally, Claude over there got us a new one, AMRAD25, because it's 2025. It's March now, guys. It's going to be spring thaw. Anybody who's got a garden out there, maybe you got a homestead, look at what they've got with their deep ocean powered fertilizer. It's kid safe, pet safe. You will have an enormous yield. And if you have questions about what would be best for your home garden, give them a call. They love getting the American Radicals Podcast. If you want to get healthy in 2025, as I continue to do, I'm hammering the black turmeric every single day. Have been doing it over a year and feeling much better than I did 12 months ago. That's also an option for you. They got lion's mane, they got the ginseng and ginger. They even have an eczema balm, all of it grown with their own fertilizer. So it's very vertically integrated, American-owned company in Georgia, trueearth.co, trueearth.co, and the promo code is AMRAD25, and you get 10% off everything they got across the store. So with that being said, let's bring on Garrett O'Boyle at GOB Actual is where you find him on the social media platforms. Garrett, how you doing today?
I'm doing, Steve. I am doing. How are you?
I'm ready to go. I kind of was very sick of hearing about the Donald Trump speech. I didn't watch it. Don't really care about it that much. I know it was really well received. A lot of people were focusing in on it, but I was behind the scenes looking at all these sorts of stories that were slipping past the goalie. We got to stay focused, which is what we do here, which is probably why we have almost 5,000 followers and not 500,000 followers, but that's what we're about. We're about staying on task, staying on focus, unlike our Supreme Court, which forgot that it's a co-equal branch, but it is Article 3, and it doesn't get to make executive decisions. But apparently now, in the alleged land of the free, the courts, those 9 pesky justices, or at least 5 of those communists, are dictating what we have to do with our money in this country. Before I got to that, actually, I want to set the stage because I found a video. If you missed the Tuesday episode, guys, I think I was pretty proud of my analogy where I said that sending money to Ukraine was basically like I'm gambling and Garrett has to get me out of hawk to the mob. It was a fun comparison. And I found a video. Now, it's not about gambling. It's not about the mob, but it is, I think, analogous to government workers who, I mean, giving them the maximum benefit of the doubt, they do the good work that's out there. And it's not the problem that they're not working hard. Its problem is that their jobs are just not worth doing. So I found this video, Garrett, and I thought of you. Let's get us started with an early palate cleanse just to set the stage. Because what the heck is this woman doing? And is it worth doing at all?
Easy. Keep going. Push, push, push.
Oh, that looks dangerous.
Nice. Stay concentrated. You good?
Nice.
Really good.
Really good.
Breathe, breathe.
Yeah, she goes for like a couple more minutes on that. That was what she was training for, Garrett. So she could run from beam to beam to beam in the, I guess, rare event that maybe a grizzly bear started chasing after her along a reservoir. That would probably bode well for her. But if you're a government worker, it's not that you're not doing a good job. It's just that your job's not worth doing, right?
Absolutely, and that's most of their jobs are not worth doing. But I'm a little frustrated, Steve, because of these pesky commie judges that it seems like we've been talking about quite a bit already this year, because they just keep putting a stick in the mud for what we want, for what we voted for, and really what we need in a large way. So I'm interested to see what else you have brought to the fore with these loser, subversive Marxists. They're everywhere. They're in the judicial branch. They're in the legislative branch. They're in the executive branch.
I'm starting to think that the Supreme Court justices have a job that's not worth doing, or at least what they perceive to be their job is definitely not their job. It's not worth them doing. We're going to go to Daily Wire for this. This was widely reported. Supreme Court denies the Trump administration request to halt $2 billion in foreign aid. So the executive branch wants to not send our money to other countries. And the Supreme Court said, no, you got to go ahead and do that. The Supreme Court on Wednesday dealt a significant blow to the Trump administration. It ruled that federal government must pay out $2 billion from the USAID to contractors out there. All 3 leftist judges were joined by John Roberts and Amy Barrett. Remember, guys, we don't say Coney because that's her dad's name, because the patriarchy always wins. Amy Barrett, a President Donald Trump appointee, betraying the base that was so excited because she was going to take over for Ruth Ginsburg. The case began when a group of American businesses and nonprofits that receive funds from USAID claimed that Trump's pause on foreign aid payments was unlawful. So the executive, according to these people, and now 5 Supreme Court justices, the executive can't make executive decisions for how he executes his duty as being in charge of the executive branch.
It's, like I said, it's very frustrating to see this. I guess, though, we shouldn't be surprised. I saw this tweet, I think yesterday, and it was from 2020. I wish I was better at recollecting things with just just right off the tip of my brain. But I forget who put it out there, and it was talking about way back then when she first was nominated for this position, how not a good pick, and she's only proven that to be true since she's been in her very elevated position in the judicial branch. And part of me is like, well, I guess that's what we get. We've talked about this before. One of the critical errors of Donald Trump, especially in his first term, and I guess time will tell in the second term, is his lack of discretion when it comes to picking solid people. the example we always have beat on over the last, I don't know, year and a half or however long we've been doing this, was Christopher Wray. I mean, shining example for us considering our background. But you're taking the advice of a guy like Chris Christie. I don't know who told him, hey, Amy Coney Barrett's a good pick, but go with her. She's a conservative. She's gonna be a great change up for the court. Clearly not the case.
I think that she just attended enough Federalist Society parties and met with what they deemed to be acceptable for the highest court in the land, which is basically maintain the status quo. Just do it with, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a flourish, because she handled the hearings very well.
Yeah.
Remember, she had like a notepad as opposed to being, surrounded by documents and overwhelmed for the moment. That actually went off really well for her. But, is she really an upgrade now from Ruth Ginsburg?
Doesn't seem
Or
like
the
it.
exact same way that Ginsburg would have,
Right.
and with the exception of the Dobbs versus Jackson decision. I mean, was that basically it? And look, if you want to have a real direct conversation about it, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. If she goes every single way that Ginsburg went from here on in, just the Dobbs versus Jackson decision was worth the appointment. But we were hoping for a little bit better than that. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I guess it's just a broader piece of the puzzle of the decline that I think is going to happen no matter what. For whatever reason, we have some type of reprieve to a degree right now, but we see all sorts of interference already. Doesn't mean you don't continue to carry the torch. Doesn't mean you don't continue to push for what is right, and move forward, saying, no, we're going to do the right thing no matter what. Either way, we'll fight you in the courts if we must. But it's disheartening to see the interference coming already from all. It's March 6th. It's March 6th only, of the first year of this new term. And it's just interference left and right. I know you mentioned Trump's speech. Did you see the clip that's been kind of circulating around of ACB staring down Donald Trump or kind of looking at him with disdain? I watched it a few times and I was like, I don't know if that's what that look was or not, but
I don't know. I might have that look in my eyes if you maybe sit there for hours upon hours and keep standing up and sitting down. Like, this is not a Catholic mass. I'm going to sit down and I don't need to continue to just do the pomp and circumstance. If I was president, I would not do a State of the Union speech. I would send a letter, because that's what George Washington did. Do you think you're better than George Washington?
I'd go on Joe Rogan. He did it once before he was president. Go on Joe Rogan for 3 hours.
I am stand corrected. You've convinced me. All right. Would you want Amy Barrett or John Roberts to be overseeing this lawsuit, which I teased in the opening, which is a college student who's now suing because she can't read? Right? Reporting from the Blaze, young college student is suing her old school district in Connecticut after she graduated with honors, even though she cannot read or write. Lawsuit alleges that.
Wait. You almost buried the lead there. She graduated with honors?
Well, Alicia Ortiz began manifesting problems with letter, sound, and number recognition as early as first grade, and could not read at a first grade level until she was in sixth grade. There was a language barrier. Her mom is foreign born, and she was having issues that they actually thought might be dyslexia. So in high school, teachers suggested she be tested for dyslexia. Unfortunately, the testing was not completed until her final day at high school as a senior. She was determined to be dyslexic. School officials offered her a deferred diploma, but she said, no, I'm graduating with honors. I'm going out on time. She earned a scholarship to attend the University of Connecticut, UConn, where she's currently enrolled full-time, but doesn't attend classes because of mental health concerns, according to her. Ortiz claims she managed to complete her college coursework through talk to text and other apps, stating that they gave her a voice that she didn't know she had. So UConn does not consider SAT scores when they do admissions, particularly those for people who are getting scholarships. They have what they deem to be a holistic approach.
Sure. Yes. Okay.
Is this a joke?
It seems like this seems like a Babylon Bee article, but it's not, sadly. And this is as as sad as this is, I find it utterly hilarious at the same time because
It's a
I,
perfect descriptor of where we are at with Satan's
and
Youth Ministries right now.
yes, and where we're headed because as soon as you said she was using dictation apps or talk to text or whatever, this is where we're going. This is what it's going to be. It's going to be all the kids are going to have their phone and tablet and computer, and they're not going to even we're going to be to a point where they don't even type. They just talk.
And this might be specific to my own experience. I don't know if you encountered this. I remember as police officers being told that make sure that you don't write a report and do things like LOL and IRL
No,
and
no way.
SMH because it was becoming a problem as new officers were coming in and was basically speaking in text message short form, but
Yeah.
doing it on police documents.
Yeah, this so you know what, man, this is where we're headed, Steve, because at my police department, which I was actually a little surprised once I got over to the FBI that you still typed everything. At my police department, we had employees who their whole job was to transcribe our reports. So we had like a call-in line in our um not it wasn't our roll call room, like our report room, and you call the number and I think it was like number 3. You hit number 3 to record, and you could hit number 4 to pause it if you wanted to kind of collect your thoughts. And it took me a while to kind of grow accustomed to that way. As I've said recently, I prefer writing. That's why I like doing the Substack because I'm able to think about things, to articulate it maybe in a different or better way when I'm putting it on paper and or on a screen. And so it took me a bit to kind of get that habit down, but I totally can see and understand where police departments or any job that includes written reports that coming down from the head shed where hey, don't use the shorthand that you're using on Twitter because that's not going to fly for the business setting or the government setting even.
So that's Connecticut. I mean, let's go to, I think you would say like cousin type of states. Let's go to Vermont and Massachusetts for another issue with Is This Joking? And it's about schools because there's two different stories reporting at the Federalist about middle school students, one in female in Vermont and one in Massachusetts, who wore the exact same t-shirt as you see there on display that says there are only two genders. It's very divisive here. 13-year-old student who's not named, they call her MP in Vermont, recently donned the shirt displaying there are only two genders. She was disciplined, and in classic civil disobedience, she's a suspendable. She wore the shirt to school the next day.
Good for
Her
her.
mother and stepfather contacted and retained the Thomas More Society because she was disciplined a second time. And she cited the case that we've talked about multiple times, 69 Supreme Court case, Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District. That's what basically says that they could wear the black armbands because it wasn't disruptive. And they won that case. And they also cited her religious freedom because, Genesis 1:27, God created mankind in his image, in their image of God. He created them, male and female. He created them. And the created them does not mean they, them. Anyway, the school relented because it gets federal funding. Basically, that's what ultimately made their decision. It wasn't because they acquiesced, because they recognized that she has a First Amendment right, and that they were in the wrong. They just want to get that sweet, sweet federal government cash. And then, even though they relented, she was admonished again for wearing the shirt. But then the school apologized. So that's out of Vermont. Let's go over to Massachusetts, Boston, where there was a tea party at one point. And we've covered this story in the past, but I think it's worth getting back into because an identical scenario involving another middle school shirt wearer in Massachusetts pending before the Supreme Court and Amy Barrett and John Roberts. The case involves the exact same two-gender shirt. The student fought a lawsuit, but has lost in the lower courts. The appeal's gone all the way. And this was what the defense was for the school's perspective. At the present time, Massachusetts law provides protection against discrimination, harassment, and bullying on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. So apparently wearing the t-shirt gives other students a case of the feels, and ergo the lower courts in Massachusetts, home of the Boston Tea Party, said that the student cannot wear the shirt because it's disruptive to education and it's bullying and maybe terrorism.
Dude, this this should not take a lawsuit at all. Anybody who understands the First Amendment even a little bit should understand and know. And this is where I have an issue. Of course, people in law enforcement should know the First Amendment, should understand it. We see all sorts of errors there alone, but all of these other government institutions and schools of late, I'd say, I don't know, the last handful of years at least, seems to be one of the main places where they are stepping in to interfere with common knowledge, or what you would think is common knowledge regarding the First Amendment. And what are they doing it for, Steve? They're doing it because of tyranny, arbitrary or despotic abuse of their power. It doesn't get more arbitrary than this. This isn't harassment. This isn't bullying somebody because of gender identity or whatever. If you want to decide that you're some made up gender, that doesn't make me the bully. It makes you insane. So whatever's on the shirt. We've talked about Riley Gaines recently, and I know they're selling the t-shirts with the chromosomes on them. And
Science.
right. Yeah. Oh man, dude. Great point. Absolutely great point, because how often, again, in the last handful of years, have we heard trust the science? Or my favorite, Anthony Fauci, I am the science. Okay, well, literal science plus God's creation and the way he's orchestrated the world through his natural law says there's two. That's all there is. So none of this makes anybody a bully. And you want to talk about make America great again? Okay, fine. It starts with having a little bit of thick skin. Uh, I I think back to the 90s when we were kids. And I'm sure there are older people, probably some listening, who would say, "Well, I can think back to the 80s or the 70s or the 60s maybe." And we just continue to decline towards just weakness.
The whole argument that this is a distraction or it's disruptive to the school environment. We were at the park the other day, and I saw one of these kids that had just gotten out of school, and she has a fox tail because she's identifying as a fox in the school. And I've heard stories about like litter boxes being put in. I think that's a lot more disruptive. It's basically just picking winners and losers that it comes to a preferred class of citizen, right? Or your preferred persecuted class. And for whatever reason, spirit of the age, demonic possession, whatever you want to call it, has driven government funded schools, Satan's youth ministries, to say that that sort of demented perspective is something that needs to be championed, right? That needs to be put up on a pedestal because they're really persecuted, even though every room they walk into, they get a standing ovation. In fact, they get their own private litter box, right?
Right, right. But then if you're the kid who's battling through cancer, and the president says, "Hey, Secret Service, make him a Secret Service agent because hey, it's a nice thing to do, and just let's just do it." Then that kid is going to get berated and used as a pawn, and realistically by both sides to some degree. But none of it makes sense. It's a lot of circular reasoning. Oh, you need to trust me in this argument regarding the T-shirt, but not this one regarding the kid with cancer or whatever. And
DJ is an upgrade to whatever the hell they had going on in Butler, Pennsylvania.
let
Right.
I'm going to throw this up here because it's hard for me to resist when we talk about First Amendment issues. So our favorite Middle Tennessee State University's First Amendment Center. You mentioned Tinker because they used it in the case, which of course, because it's still the ruling decision. So I'll shy away from what they have to say about Tinker. You can go read that on your own if you want. But this part I think is important. And again, it goes to what we were just saying about First Amendment, just common sense. Right here, it says protecting expressive rights. If school officials attempt to punish students who exercise their expressive rights by wearing buttons, writing on fingernails, or protest messages on shirts, oh, ding, 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 they could find themselves slapped with protected speech or petition action lawsuits. In addition, in districts that have imposed incentives to increase participation in voluntary uniform and uniform like dress codes, threats of or actual lawsuits have quickly emerged to halt this allegedly coercive practice. But again, it goes to the broader problem that we are seeing in America is the litigious society that we are in is only continuing to get worse. It shouldn't take lawsuits. It shouldn't take thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands or maybe even millions of dollars to fight an evil government, to fight a tyrannical government. And I know I'm using my broad brush of evil and tyrannical here. sure, maybe it's not always that way, but in these instances, it absolutely 100% is. There's no other way around it when you look at the definition of the word: arbitrary abuse of authority. The plain and simple, that's what this is.
I think that that's actually an appropriate descriptor of this completely different topic, which I want to talk about, the using the SNAP benefits for restaurants. I mean, talk about arbitrary, despotic. This is basically taking your money, my money, and picking winners and losers. I dug into this a little bit, and because at first I was like, is this joking? I mean, we talked about how there's going to be maybe some more restrictions on using food stamps because there's going to be Maha, right? You got RFK Jr. in there, and you can only buy healthy foods now. You can't just buy the flaming hot Cheetos anymore. And then there's all these problems with it. And maybe we're talking about that the debit card that they give you that needs to go away. We need to go back to monopoly money. A little make shame great again. And then I saw this piece, and it comes from Colorado. Their General Assembly is passing a law right now. Okay, the Restaurant Meals Program. Senate Bill 169 requires the State Department of Human Services to submit an application by January 1st next year to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which used to pay you and me, right? Requesting to join the federal restaurant meals program. So as of June of last year, 9 other states have already adopted this program.
Oh, man.
They would be this 10th state. Dude. Last year, 10% of the entire population of Colorado was on SNAP. Now, I went to the program, Garrett. There's actually listed on the USDA website, the SNAP Restaurant Meals Program. They put it on there. Doge, get on this, guys. So it says that the participating restaurants, they have to meet with certain qualifications before you can go in. You can't just go into any old restaurant.
Right? McDonald's isn't going to make the cut.
No. Well, I mean, I don't know. They were eating the pregame meals before the State of the Union that were from McDonald's. It could be. All right. There's some bullet points here that are required in order to get on the list of approved restaurants to use your food stamps at. 80% of what you spend at a restaurant is entertainment, just so you know. All right, so the restaurants have to utilize practices of procuring locally produced foods. So no chain restaurants, I guess. They don't want to have Applebee's taking advantage. Serve foods that represent diverse cultural traditions.
What? Oh, gosh. Here we go again.
Serve geographically diverse regions of the state. You can't just be in a central hub in a city. You got to be all over the place. Offer the option.
So your mom and pop shops, they're out then.
Offer the option for the patron to choose how to pay for their meal in underinvested communities.
Okay. Steve, I don't even know what to say, man.
Well, look, I mean, that's gotta go. I mean, that's a joke. If I told you that we were giving government welfare to people so they could go and eat at restaurants, you would say you're retarded. And we can say retarded now because Trump is president. But the government that we run now hates you and doesn't care. They're just going to pit people against each other and try to get them addicted to the spending. And they create programs which inflate the currency and then necessitate more people to get on the programs. It's almost like it's designed that way, to be in a death spiral. But all that being said, we're still not as bad as one of our counterparts across the pond, not the UK this time, which wants to go after your iPhone. But let's talk about Germany, because they no track record there of any persecution. This is from reclaimthenet.org. Report your family for wrongthink. This is a German government initiative.
Steve, they've been down this road before. We've talked about it before. They may not have called it wrongthink. I don't know what the Deutschland would be for that. But
I don't know what you're talking about. Nothing happened between the 30s and 40s.
But Untermensch, I mean, dude, this is Steve. We are living in an alternate reality, apparently, because we are marching down the same road that, well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not an alternate reality. This is just the road that humans go down. And then they pull it back and say, that's actually pretty evil. Maybe we shouldn't just start mass slaughtering Untermensch because of wrongthink. And that absolutely was a piece of it back in the 30s and 40s. And
look, we're America only, kind of, right? Like, well, what do we care about Germany? Stick with me on this one, American radicals, because it's almost like I've been doing this for 183 episodes. There's a connection here. You're just going to have to find out. But first, eat your peas because that woman could definitely stand to eat some peas rather than some bratwurst. Anyway, Germany's Interior Ministry launched a project that is called, quote, Advice Compass on Conspiracy Thinking. The center is there to provide advice to anyone who suspects that their friends or family have fallen victim to conspiracy theories. Ryan Matta, do not go to Germany. All right. So that woman there in the picture, for those who are watching here on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod, smash the thumbs up, guys. Her name is Nancy Pfizer. She has a hypothesis that conspiracy theories can lead to extremism, crimes, and violence. She then goes down to explaining why it's important to keep an eye on your loved ones and report them to the authorities should the first element of this long chain of harms be forced together and conspiracy theories are detected. So what you could do is you can go for free to this government initiative, the first appointment for any anonymous initial advice. You can get advice from the government on how to deal with your friends and family member because they might be believing conspiracy theories that the government doesn't like, right?
Yes.
And then if that initial consultation reveals a longer term need for advice, subsequent advice process is passed on to the local advice center so that now local government officials can come and visit you and your loved ones in Germany.
Dude,
Because you engaged in wrong things,
yes.
right?
I mean, Steve, okay. While you're going through that, it just was searing more and more into my brain. Our Holocaust Memorial Museum trip. We've done an episode here. I think we called it Some Were Neighbors. So I went just now over to their website and pulled it up. Some Were Neighbors. Everybody, just briefly recall what Steve just said about what Germany is doing right now. And then think of this. Change some of the nouns in here if you want to modern day nouns like conspiracy theorist, wrong think, whatever. It says, how was the Holocaust possible? The central role of Adolf Hitler and other Nazi leaders in the murder of 6 million Jews is indisputable. But they could not carry this out alone. The Nazis had help from millions of ordinary people across Europe. Oh, I don't know, maybe like report your family members, report your neighbors for wrong think, or what the state has called a conspiracy theory. Some Europeans acted out of hatred for Jews, but many others weighed various pressures and incentives in responding to the plight of the victims. Amid war and upheaval, a range of motivations, fear, greed, opportunity, those things are a running thread throughout human history, led people to make choices that often had deadly impact. How did individuals respond to the persecution and murder of their Jewish classmates, coworkers, neighbors, and friends? How did relationships and roles shape their decision? What drove a rare few to risk helping the victims? I mean, we've seen this story before. It's mind-boggling, Steve. Absolutely mind-boggling.
And one of the references in that story there about this German anti-conspiracy theory initiative is that the hypothesis is that it can lead to extremism. Extremism is a very loaded term, and language is very important because extremism really doesn't mean anything. It just sounds scary. I mean,
Yes.
I'm kind of an extremist. I run an extreme amount of miles every single morning, and everybody thinks that I'm weird, and I'm okay with that. That means that I'm an extremist, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of these terms that's been used and weaponized and is sort of attached to the way that the government can become the arbiter of right think and wrong think. Because if you engage in wrong think, then you could become an extremist. And we're going to scare you about, finish this, is it national security, right, Garrett? And that's why I wanted to connect the German story with this one that comes from here and our new DNI director. U.S. Intel Chief Tulsi Gabbard declares radical Islamist terrorism the most urgent national security threat. Stick with me, guys, because I know everybody wants to jump up and down, and as this article sort of gets to, and they present it in a rather good picture of Tulsi Gabbard compared to how it's been. But I think we're pretty consistent on this program that the government should never be the arbiter of right think or wrong think. But it's worth just going into because we do have a background in this. And then maybe there could be some room for conversation on how the government can have a role in people who might be engaged in a problematic or dangerous line of thinking that could lead them one way or another. I don't know. But before we get to that, let's read what Tulsi Gabbard has to say and how it contradicts everything that we've heard the last 4 years, which is good, but kind of not good. right? So the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, warned that radical Islamist terrorism is the biggest national security threat the nation faces today. Now, that contrasts that with former FBI Director Christopher Wray, who testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee a few years back, saying that, quote, the top threat we face from domestic violent extremists continues to be those who we identify as racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically those who advocate for the superiority of the white race. So white supremacy. Joe Biden then, right after that, 1 month later, said, quote, we won't ignore that our own intelligence agency have determined the most lethal terrorist threat to the homeland today is from the white supremacist terrorists. And that was basically the government making an argument and actually characterizing people and doing the background work, because you could be white, black, purple, green, orange, but if you vote for Republican, you're a white supremacist, right? And that's racially motivated violent extremism, not because you are predisposed to commit an act of violence at all, but just because you are engaging in what the powers that be deem to be wrong think. That's extremism. And you're a subscriber to a certain belief, I guess, or an adherent, and ergo your voting tendencies make you an enemy of the state. Now, take this to the new threat. I think there's been proven to be a more violent force, right? The ideology that's behind radical, or as it's characterized, radical Islamist terrorism certainly has a higher body count than white supremacy, despite even when they juke those stats and they include prison crimes, right? But again, I'm back to the slippery slope. We're going to re-rack it and do it all over again, aren't we?
This is what this appears to me to be is the current administration saying, what worked in the past? Oh, I know. Target the Muslims. Target them, because remember after 9/11 how everybody loved the government and all but one voted for the Patriot Act, and we got sweeping new authorities through FISA, which, by the way, people like Pam Bondi are for. We had the American people on our side again. They weren't anti-government violent extremists. They were pro-government violent extremists, as long as the violent extremism was against our Islamic neighbors. And oh, let's just go start some wars against them too, because the military industrial complex must march on. That, I don't know how else to look at it at this point, because it's 2025. Are there still violent Islamic extremists across the world? 100%, absolutely. Do we need to do our utmost to snuff them out when they are interfering with American interests, perhaps killing service members stationed abroad, even if they're doing some type of attack here on the homeland? 100%, absolutely. Just like we need to do, especially on the homeland, with any type of criminal entity or terrorist entity, organized or otherwise. We should be doing our utmost to stop those things. And we talked about it, I think, on Tuesday. We mentioned the playbook. That's what these cases turn into. And it's just more fear mongering. It's not white supremacy this time. It's back to Islamic extremism. I mean, I guess it's a broader version of the playbook.
It basically is just expanding what government can do, right? It's recognizing that we can change the definition and whatever is required so that we can get enhanced capabilities, more power, because our ultimate goal is to grow, get more funding, more personnel, more goodies, more tools, and whatever message we have to put out there, because people are willing to sacrifice their liberty because they don't want to recognize the fact that liberty and freedom is inherently dangerous. You have to be your own first responder, and they just want security. So we're going to go with that. And look, I understand that sentiment, because there's a track record and it's a difficult line to toe, because you have these national security agencies like our ex-girlfriend at the FBI and others like them that are supposed to stand up and try to prevent these things from happening, but you can't really have pre-crime. And when you empower these bodies to have all these tools, they inevitably come to the conclusion, the Skynet from Terminator analogy holds, that their greatest enemy to their own success, which is always growth, is someone who wants to cut back, who wants to limit its abilities, and they will rewrite the definitions of what it is to be a terrorist so that they can come after you because you present the greatest threat to its success and to its growth. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have, I think, a reasonable approach. Like, you worked on a joint terrorism task force, Garrett. If you get a tip, and I mean, look, let's set this up. Let's say that Kash Patel gives Steve Friend a call and says, Steve, I want you to go in and do reviews of the different field offices. And you've already been reinstated, by the way, in my theoretical. Right? I show up at the field office, and I think one of the things that I've told you and told others that I would do is I want to see every single counterterrorism case that you have, and I want to know why you opened that up. Was it for First Amendment protected activity? That doesn't mean that you can't actually do a cursory look at somebody who's engaging in First Amendment protected activity that isn't criminal, but could indicate something more. But you don't then keep it open, right? Like, you don't just keep gathering information and then justifying having it open by then poking and prodding and trying to get the person to engage with them, because we're going to assume that they're guilty to begin with. We have to have a different fundamental approach to say innocent until proven guilty. And if I ask you, Garrett, hey, Garrett, you opened this case or you started looking at this individual for their First Amendment protected activity, they're online saying, I like ISIS. So you looked at them. Has anything come about in a reasonable amount of time? Why didn't you close it down? Why did you then say, I want to have a confidential human source go and bump them and say, hey, want to go do a terrorism? I mean, where is the line that's appropriate in your book?
I think for me, especially when you take the relative simplicity that a place like the FBI has to open a case on somebody, I'm okay if you get this type of information and you either open a preliminary investigation, which you don't have as many tools available to you to look into people's history and background. You can definitely do open source type of queries. So if you can get into their social media and take a look and, oh, there he is waving an ISIS flag, that's disconcerting, or would be to the vast majority of people. But as we've talked about before, when it comes to the First Amendment, it is protected. So if you can't find anything else in a reasonable amount of time, which I would say, if that's all you've got, he's got a social media picture of an ISIS flag, maybe even with a comment. Well, let's pull from a real example, like that lady in I forget where she was.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, when she said that she hopes that soldiers get sent back in tightly packed wooden boxes, or however she said it, and FBI agents showed up at her door. As much as you may disdain that statement, as much as you may disdain her desire to see American soldiers killed, it is her right in this country. So that does not mean that you keep it open in perpetuity to try to get her, to try to find a crime, to try to inject a crime or an idea of a crime to her. So to me, if that's all you got, I think you have to close it down within 30 days, to be honest. If you gather some other type of information in that time, maybe another 30 is justified. But we have seen examples firsthand of cases like these being open for years and years and years. At what point does that stop being a law enforcement officer doing their due diligence like they should and becomes tyranny, like we talked about, the arbitrary use of their power just because I can, because the SAC or my SSA need the case open. We need to have cases on the books. Well, this one's been open for 6 years or whatever. Fill in the blank. 2 years, 1 year, 5. And the guy hangs out in his mom's basement. And sure, okay, he's got a picture that he put up there on his Instagram that Instagram then deleted from way in the beginning, 5 years ago when we opened it. That's tyranny. Whether you like their activity or not, it's tyranny.
I mean, yeah, you use the Oklahoma example. I mean, somebody who's saying things out online, saying like, I like ISIS, or somebody who's out there saying, I like Russia, or I like North Korea. Not saying that I want to be friends with the people. We just happen to live in a country where you're allowed to say that. And as long as you hold those positions, but are not going to hurt anybody. I mean, there was this old saying like, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But that was probably pre-Barack Obama. I want to call back because there was that video I showed you of the woman who was learning to run for reasons that are just not worth doing, right? I mean, like, look, we're broadcasting professionals. We'll do this again. Set this up for our next story because talk about having a government job that's just not worth doing.
Easy. Keep going. Push, push, push.
Nice breathe.
I can't imagine that being your aspiration. But Garrett, let's go to this cartoon, right? This coming from the Daily Caller, and I have the image there. It's a gender-neutral alien, as you're seeing, and you talk about having a job that's not worth doing. This is a fired worker from NOAA, right? That's that oceanic agency that tells you what the temperature is out in the water. His name is Tom DiLiberto, the creator and star of his own cartoon, right? He starred in his own. It's called Teak and Tom Explore Planet Earth. It's an animated series produced by NOAA at a cost exceeding $3 million. The now fired public affairs specialist, he's a public affairs guy who did a cartoon that starred himself. Talk about loving yourself to be in front of the camera. He's warning that DOGE's budget cuts could weaken disaster preparedness. The 5-part series is intended to educate children about Earth's weather and climate. It stars DiLiberto as himself, alongside Teak, an alien from the planet Quelos. Teak is dressed using they/them pronouns and gender-neutral pronouns. The series' most popular installment is episode 4, An Ocean of Data from Cool Technology, and it has amassed 150 views on YouTube.
Oh, 150.
Our
Yeah.
YouTube footprint is rather small. I think we've accumulated over 150 views.
I think our most viewed clip is of Marcus Allen's last testimony. I think it's around. I think it's over 1,000 views. Our typical episodes get maybe a couple dozen, but we're all over the place. We're not just on YouTube. We're all over. But
that Noah's camped out on YouTube. They're not on Rumble.
And 150 views is their claim to fame. How much did you say this?
$3 million.
Steve, I mean, I'm
this is a joke.
I'm sorry to make this about us, but you could have paid our salaries easily with that and our benefits while we sit here in purgatory. I mean, 3 million. You've got people making YouTube videos for far less than that, and they're getting far more views, and YouTube is paying them.
Garrett, for $3 million, I could just toss you the mic and have you give 15-minute sermons and would be viral compared to whatever that sort of just disgusting cartoon was put out. All right. All right. Let's go over to the globalist BlackRock Corporation, which is now going to own the Panama Canal because
great. I thought this was a feather in Donald Trump's hat, Steve.
I thought it was supposed to be a good thing, but it's a little bit like I think the comparison was you get moved out of the prisoner of war camp in Japan, but then put on one of the trains. like, do you really want this to go on? And this is reporting from headline USA.com. BlackRock is purchasing the Panama Canal. Consortium of investors. I like that word, consortium. I'm going to start using it more.
I've got loss of consortium over the last.
The suspendables are a consortium. All right. They are going to buy a majority stake in the Panama Canal for $23 billion. Come on, Elon. You could do it. The move comes after President Trump alleged that Chinese interference with the operations at the Panama Canal. And conservatives, they note here, have criticized BlackRock, among other things, for abusing its market power to push leftist policies. They've also been part of the Democrat scheme to rebuild Ukraine after the war with Russia. They don't do DEI anymore, so I guess they're good again. It's kind of like we're supposed to like Bud Light because they signed a deal with Dana White at the UFC. I'm thinking they probably just put the DEI in the back drawer until the Pharaoh, who knows not Joseph, reemerges as the president of the United States.
Yeah, just pump the brakes on these awful ideas, and we'll be back at the feet of Moloch before too long.
And now, giving you a lot of bad, let's talk about a couple of good things that were started as like, is this a joke? Like, really? Okay, I approve. All right. And that one of those is the fact that the BLM Plaza in Washington, D.C. is now going to be renamed. because this has been out there for 5 years. This is
Yes.
reporting from the Washington Post because democracy dies in darkness.
Yes, it
The
does.
mayor of the District of Columbia is signaling that she will paint over the BLM Plaza because the Republicans are threatening her funding because she's a really
Oh,
principled person who's
there
going to
it goes.
stand on that note. So Muriel Bowser signaled 2 days ago that DC would paint a new mural on the Black Lives Matter Plaza outside the White House. There's a new bill that's threatening millions of dollars in transportation funding if Bowser does not agree. So we're doing some more energetic governance is going on here. The new law would require Bowser to adopt the name Liberty Plaza and remove every mention of BLM Plaza from city websites and documents. And if enacted, it would put $185 million. That's a lot of cartoons in transportation funding on the line. So she would lose potentially $185 million in federal funding if she doesn't comply with that. So they've turned her arm. And I mean, look, does it change your life one way or another if they rename a plaza in Washington, D.C.? No.
Not
But I think there's a moral victory here. There's a certain level of like, we're just going to exert a level of force on you vile, vicious communists who have put us through this. And I'm here for that. I approve.
I say pull her funding anyways. Just because she's turned her hand and shown that she does not stand on principle. She doesn't believe this crap. If she did, she would say, fine, we're not changing the name. My constituents voted me in because of my principles, because of what I believe in, which is in solidarity with what they believe in, which is why they voted me into this position. So you can take your federal funding and shove it. But she's not going.
It's a federal city. That's going to be hard.
Well, yeah, fair. That's a fair point. I'm sure they still have. Well, I guess I don't know how that would
There's
work.
actually a push. I don't know if you're aware of this to make, I don't know, the president in charge of Washington, D.C. Like you're not going to have home rule anymore in Washington, D.C. It's going to be completely controlled by the federal government. I know that the Congress itself does pass legislation and they almost act like a town council in certain regards. It's a really weird system they
Yeah,
have set up
that's
in that place.
now I've got it stuck in my head. I'm going to have to go do some digging into the history of this because when did Washington D.C. even start having a mayor? I can't imagine that when New York City had a mayor, 150, 200 years ago. Did Washington D.C. like in the early stages of our country? I wonder. I'm curious now.
All right, then the second one, which is sort of like a head scratcher, are they joking about this? And then I read into it, and it became apparent as to why. And you know why? It's because Gavin Newsom wants to run for president. But this is a California order. It's an executive order from Gavin Newsom that is ordering a return to the office by state government workers in California. So Gavin Newsom ordered state employees to return to the office 4 days a week. I mean, you don't want to cold turkey, go to 5 days a week. They have to get there by July so they can really acclimate themselves over the next couple of weeks to lose a couple lbs so they can put on the belt again and not have the unrestricted waistbands full time. And he noted, and I thought it was fair, that custodial and janitorial staff are already in the buildings. So it's not really fair to them. He made it an equity thing.
Yes.
Why is there janitorial staff in buildings that are otherwise unoccupied? But the California government spent almost $3 billion. It's like $2.8 billion on wages and benefits for 220,000 employees for the whole state.
Wow.
And the finality of this story is that Gavin Newsom wants to hire more federal workers who got laid off. So, their taxpayers in California can fund the guys like the NOAA public affairs officer who created a cartoon that 150 people watched because they didn't want to see him interacting with a gender neutral alien.
Man, when you think of fiscal cliffs, as bad as the one our nation is facing, California is worse. At what point do these quote unquote leaders, I use that term very, very, very loosely, realize this is unsustainable? But instead, he's launching a podcast. He's doing this executive order because he's trying to run for president. That's what this is. He thinks, the time is now. I'm the next poster child for the Democrat Party, and he's an absolutely insane Marxist lunatic who also has no principles. He's not standing firm on anything for any reason. He's just trying to be liked some more. And now make it, I mean, dude, the janitor's got to be thinking, how many times am I going to mop this floor that nobody walks
that
on?
nobody's on, sitting there waxing the floor because Gavin Newsom told everybody with his, with his American Psycho haircut that they could just stay home and zoom it in for the last 5 years. I mean, look, it's been 5 years. In a couple weeks, was March 16th was the day that the whole world stood still, right? That we were all told that we had to stay home 2 weeks to flatten the economy, and they just never picked back up. So you're coming
Right.
up on 5 years.
That's the
And-
permanence of government right there. It might be one of the pinnacle examples of government permanence. They don't. It all starts allegedly from a place of good intent. I don't think that that's true, but we talked about EBT again today, and now how 10 states are saying, oh yeah, you can go out to eat, you can go to restaurants and use your EBT card, which is absolutely okay. When we had paying jobs, Steve, full disclosure, we would go out to eat on occasion, especially over the weekend. We would get takeout or whatever, and we enjoyed that as a family. Or even better was when, I think we only had 3 girls at the time, but we'd put the girls to bed, and one of us would run and grab some food from a local eatery and bring it home and watch Netflix, and it was great. We don't do that so much anymore because we can't. But government programs, they just get created to stay and to just exist for government. And honestly, I really think that if Donald Trump wasn't elected, Gavin Newsom wouldn't be doing this, because that permanence would have continued to exist. Oh, don't worry about the 2 weeks to stop the spread. We all work from home now. I mean, it's crazy to me. I've heard from FBI employees even about how, yeah, we all got to go back to work. And I'm like, you didn't go back to work? How did you not go back to work? I just,
the permanence of government, man. And so the final story I have before we get to your thoughts today, Garrett, I think I like this as a permanence when I first saw it, because I'd like to see this become a tradition, maybe in this country as it is in Serbia now, apparently. But then I read more into it and I thought, ooh, that's a little bit rough. And that was the fact that in Serbia, the parliament threw a bunch of tear gas and grenades. If those watching, that is their legislative body that is throwing grenades of tear gas and flares. Now, they did this on the opening day of their spring session as a sign of support for anti-corruption protesters. So they're
okay.
they're on board for that. The problem is, though, Garrett, 2 lawmakers were injured and one had a stroke and he's in critical condition.
Yikes. Well, Al Green and his cane has nothing on these folks. That's for sure.
This is hardcore. I mean, this is doing more damage to the building than the January 6ers did.
Yes. And it's sitting members of their parliament who are doing it. I'm kind of here for that. We need some boldness back in government. When I first saw that clip, I saw that pink smoke and I thought, oh, what are they standing in solidarity with the liberal Democrats from the other night? But interesting. They're trying to battle back corruption instead. I don't know if that's the best method, but I guess it beats pitchforks for now.
It got more views than the alien cartoon on YouTube for sure.
Yeah.
So that's good for awareness purposes. All right, we're going to close it out on the American Radicals podcast today. Garrett, what are your final thoughts? And then I do have a palate cleanse for you.
Yes, sir. Ephesians 6, starting in verse 10. So this has been on my mind pretty much since most of the day yesterday. I was talking about it a little bit with somebody, and I've just been kind of dwelling on it and thinking about it a little bit, and the importance of this aspect of Scripture. It says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might, not ours, his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints, and also for me, that words may be given to me in opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. And then I have a short clip too to add to that, from a sermon that has been near and dear to my heart over the last few years since I first heard it. And yeah, I'll just let it roll for a little bit.
The call to stand firm is a call to obedience. And just draw on the imagery of a soldier for a moment. This demands executing the orders of the commanding officer. Who's the commanding officer? It's the Lord Jesus Christ. We are soldiers for Christ, and we have a commanding officer, and he is the one that sends in the orders. And when the orders come, we don't get to modify the order. We don't get to tweak the order, adjust even the method. We have a responsibility to execute the order as given. And so when it comes to obedience, we don't get to pick the hills we die on. We don't get to decide when it's time to obey. We're called to obey. And as we obey, the hill picks us. Christ picks the hill. We just obey.
We've talked about that idea before, and I think the timing was not coincidental with everything. All the stories we talked about today, the things we're dealing with our personal life and our situations. So I just think it's a good reminder for you and me and hopefully for many people listening. But I might tap into that well going forward a little bit and play some additional clips from that sermon. That pastor is a Canadian guy named James Coates, who was imprisoned for his stance during COVID. And I really think he speaks authoritatively, especially on this passage. And yeah, hopefully I can help bring some of that richness to the American radicals.
I'm going to need you to tap in for our palate cleanse, Garrett, because in your prior roles, one of your collateral duties for the FBI was a defensive tactics instructor.
Indeed.
And I want to get your opinion about how close this would be to real life FBI defensive tactics.
If someone pulls a firearm, you're going to pocket dice, unload the weapon, toss it aside. If he switches to his knife, you're going to get wrist control, spatula, bop, 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 disarmed. If he comes back with a baseball bat, you're going to duck under, wait for it, and...
Untrained but approved.
I'll take it. Anything to protect yourself, particularly if you are the type that walks in the office and puts your firearm in your drawer, because you'd be completely defenseless outside of having pocket knives and maybe a spatula. All right. That's going to do it for the American Radicals podcast for the day, folks. Back with you Saturday, 10:30 Eastern time here at rumble.com/amradpod. Hope you enjoyed it. And until then, guys, have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.